Above our heads floats an invisible landfill, inactive satellites, rocket fragments, remnants of forgotten missions. Thousands of objects orbit the Earth aimlessly, like technological zombies trapped in silence. This audiobook invites you to explore that cloud of space debris, a legacy of progress that now threatens the future of exploration. What exactly are these zombie satellites, and why could they become a bigger problem than we imagine? Zombie satellites, those inert objects floating around us, represent an increasing threat. As more nations and companies launch satellites into space, the likelihood of one becoming a zombie increases. But why are they a problem? The answer lies in the concept of space debris. Just like in the streets of a city, where waste can accumulate and create a dangerous environment in space, the accumulation of these inactive objects can lead to catastrophic collisions. In this context, it is essential to understand how we got here. The history of space debris is marked by the constant growth of space technology. Since the first satellites were launched in 1957, we have seen an exponential increase in the number of objects in orbit. However, as more satellites were launched, managing those that became obsolete did not become a priority. What happens when a satellite stops functioning? In many cases, it is simply left in orbit without a clear plan for its removal. But what are the different types of space debris surrounding us? Not everything that orbits our planet is an operational satellite. There are rocket remnants, collision fragments, and of course, those satellites that no longer respond to our commands. These elements represent a real minefield in space where a small impact can trigger a chain reaction, affecting other operational satellites. The question arises, how does space debris affect our current and future missions? Operational satellites rely on a clear space to perform their work, whether in telecommunications, meteorology, or navigation. However, every time a satellite encounters a piece of space debris, the risk of damage increases. This reality has led space agencies and companies to be more concerned about the safety of their assets in orbit. The Kármán line, that boundary located about 100 kilometers above the Earth's surface, is where gravity begins to lose its effect and where the accumulation of space debris becomes more critical. In this region, where satellites must operate, the risk of encountering inert obstacles is ever increasing. How can this influence space exploration and our ambitions to go beyond our planet? Collision statistics in space are revealing. Every year, numerous incidents involving satellites and space debris occur. But what is the frequency of these collisions? As launches increase, so does the probability of a satellite colliding with a floating metal fragment. This reality demands urgent attention and a more rigorous approach to monitoring and managing orbital space. In this regard, innovative projects are underway to track and monitor these dangers. Different organizations are developing technologies that allow for the identification and tracking of space debris. But are these initiatives sufficient? As more objects are launched into space, monitoring capabilities must evolve to maintain a safe and controlled situation. Cleaning up space is another crucial topic we must consider. There are several proposals for removing space debris, from nets that capture objects to probes that can deorbit inactive satellites. However, the question remains, how will we carry out these operations effectively and safely? Space cleanup technology is under development, but there is still a long way to go. As we delve into this topic, it is inevitable to discuss notable incidents related to zombie satellites. There have been cases where these inactive objects have caused risky situations, such as the famous incident involving the Iridium satellite and the Russian satellite Cosmos. These events remind us of the fragility of the space environment and the need to act responsibly. Legislation and regulations regarding space debris are another aspect worth exploring. At the international level, agreements have been proposed to manage space debris, but implementation and compliance vary from country to country. Are we doing enough to protect our space? The responsibility falls on nations to ensure that space remains a safe place for future generations. Finally, the future of space exploration is at stake. Space debris not only affects our current missions, but also poses challenges for future ambitions to go to Mars and beyond. As we dream of colonizing other planets, we must consider how space debris could hinder those plans. The environmental impact of space debris also deserves attention. While many of us might think that what happens in space does not affect us, the reality is that space debris could have consequences on Earth itself. Reflecting on this topic leads us to understand the responsibility we have as inhabitants of this planet. In summary, zombie satellites and space debris are more than just a technical problem. They are a challenge we must face as a society. Responsible space management is crucial to ensure that our exploration and development ambitions are not compromised. As we advance into the space age, the most pressing question is, are we ready to act before it is too late? Zombie satellites, that intriguing term that seems straight out of a science fiction movie, refers to satellites that have ceased to fulfill their function but remain floating in Earth's orbit. But what does it really mean to be a zombie satellite? These are remnants of space technology that, although they no longer respond to commands from ground controllers, are still there in the vast ocean of space, like orbiting ghosts. It's fascinating to think that while some satellites continue to collect valuable data, others remain inactive, adding to the problem of space debris. To better understand this phenomenon, it's helpful to imagine an amusement park. Picture a roller coaster that, after years of excitement and adrenaline, comes to a complete stop. However, the structure still occupies its place in the park, and although there are no more passengers, it remains part of the landscape. This is what zombie satellites are like. Some of them, like the roller coaster, were once amazing pieces of technology, but now they are just floating junk. However, instead of being on the ground, they are hundreds of kilometers above our heads. The reality is that zombie satellites can be dangerous. Why? Because even though they no longer function, they continue to travel at impressive speeds, and a small collision can have enormous repercussions. Just like an abandoned car on the road, an inactive satellite can pose a risk to other moving vehicles. This means that satellites that are still operational must constantly be alert and prepared to dodge these hazardous debris. One of the most unsettling features of zombie satellites is that they can remain in orbit for decades, even centuries. This is because, unlike objects on Earth, which eventually decompose or disintegrate, satellites in space do not face the same erosion. Instead, they keep spinning and spinning like a clock that never stops. So the question is, how many of these inactive satellites really exist? Estimates suggest that there are thousands of them, each a reminder of the past of space exploration and the responsibility we have in the present. Some of these satellites have reached the end of their useful life due to technical failures, while others have been deactivated because their missions have ended. However, even though they no longer provide useful data, their mere existence in orbit can complicate the work of space agencies looking to launch new satellites. Each launch is a game of strategy where space resembles a chessboard, and each piece, whether active or inactive, occupies a space that cannot be ignored. When talking about zombie satellites, it is inevitable to think about the history behind their creation. Many of them were launched in the 1970s and 1980s, when the space race was in full swing. In those days, the priority was innovation and exploration, and not enough attention was paid to what would happen after the satellites fulfilled their function. This approach has led to an impressive accumulation of space junk, and now we are facing the consequences of those decisions. The question that arises is, can we do something about it? The answer is yes. But it requires a collective effort. The international community must come together to address the problem of zombie satellites and space debris. This involves not only creating new technologies to clean up space, but also implementing regulations to prevent more satellites from being launched without a plan for their eventual deactivation and removal. Zombie satellites also invite us to reflect on our relationship with technology. As we move toward the future, it is essential that we learn from the mistakes of the past. Every time we launch a new satellite, we must consider not only its immediate impact, but also what will happen when it has completed its mission. The responsibility for caring for space does not rest solely with space agencies, but with all of us as inhabitants of this planet. In the end, zombie satellites are a symbol of the duality of our space exploration. They represent both human ingenuity and the need for responsibility. As we look to the future, it is essential that we keep in mind the importance of a clean and safe space, where satellites can operate without the fear of colliding with the remnants of the past. So the next time you look up at the sky and see a satellite crossing the night, remember that not all objects in space are functioning as they should. Some are echoes of a bygone time, floating in the vastness, and each one tells a story that is still waiting to be written. Technology advances, but our ability to manage what we leave behind is what will truly define our future in the exploration of the cosmos. Space debris, a term that may sound distant, has its roots in humanity's early explorations of space. It all began over 60 years ago when humans decided to venture beyond Earth's atmosphere. But what happened to the artifacts we sent into space? What became of those satellites and rockets that, like an old abandoned car, are lost in the vastness of the universe? The story of space debris dates back to 1957 when the first satellite, Sputnik, was launched into space. Since then, the space race has intensified. As more and more countries and private companies began sending objects into space, an invisible but very real problem started to accumulate. Just like at a party when everyone brings more food than can be consumed, space has become cluttered with debris that no longer serves a purpose. How many satellites have been sent into the sky in total? It is estimated that since the beginning of the space age, over 10,000 satellites have been launched. But here's the twist: more than half of them no longer function. Imagine a city filled with empty buildings, except instead of buildings, we have inactive satellites floating in Earth's orbit. This is the reality of what we call space debris. Years have passed and satellites have ceased to be useful tools and have become old remnants. Most of these zombie satellites, as we call them, no longer respond to commands from their controllers on Earth. But why do they remain in space? The reason is simple: gravity traps them. Even though they don't work, they continue to orbit the Earth like a hockey puck that, after being hit, keeps sliding on the ice. As technology has advanced, so has the amount of debris we leave behind. Satellites are not the only culprits. The rockets that launch them and fragments from collisions between these objects also contribute to the problem. Every time a satellite disintegrates or collides with another, thousands of small fragments are generated, becoming new hazards in space. The statistics are alarming. It is estimated that there are over 20,000 objects in orbit that are larger than a soccer ball. And that doesn't include the tens of thousands of smaller fragments that also float around our planet. Each of these objects poses a risk to current and future space missions. Can you imagine trying to navigate a highway full of abandoned cars? That's what operational satellites face today. As time goes on, the accumulation of space debris becomes an even more critical problem. The Kármán line, located about 100 kilometers above sea level, is where most of this debris is found. This is a key region for space missions, and the congestion of objects in this area requires increasingly sophisticated strategies to avoid collisions. The story of space debris is not just a matter of technology. It is also a human challenge. What responsibility do we have as a species to clean up the mess we have created? Nations must come together to address this problem, as space debris knows no borders. It is a global issue that affects everyone, and while it may seem that we are trapped in a cycle of space waste, there is hope. Innovative technologies are being developed to clean our orbital environment. From nets that capture inactive satellites to lasers that disintegrate dangerous fragments, human creativity is finding ways to tackle this monumental challenge. But will it be enough? Public awareness of the space debris problem is essential. Many people are unaware of what is happening beyond the atmosphere. Education and awareness are crucial steps in mobilizing future generations towards sustainable solutions. What legacy will we leave if we do not act now? In summary, the story of space debris is a lesson in responsibility and innovation. From the early launches to current challenges, the journey has been fascinating yet concerning. The next time you look up at the sky and marvel at the stars, remember that there is a hidden world of satellites, some of them inactive, teaching us about the impact of our actions in space. The story continues, and the question that remains is, how will we choose to write the next chapter? Space debris, a concept that may sound foreign to many, is classified into several categories. But what are the different types of waste that orbit the Earth? The answer is fascinating and reveals the complexity of the situation in space. There are inactive satellites, rocket remnants, and fragments resulting from collisions. Each of these elements has its own story and characteristics that contribute to the growing problem of debris in our orbit. Inactive satellites, or what some call zombie satellites, are those that have fulfilled their function but continue to float in space. Imagine an old car parked on a deserted street aimlessly and without an engine. Yet it remains there, occupying space that could be used by something more useful. These satellites, although no longer operational, do not disappear. Instead, they continue to orbit the Earth, becoming potential hazards for other active satellites. On the other hand, we have rocket remnants, which are like the wrappers of a gift that no longer holds value. After a rocket launches its payload into space, what remains can become debris. These remnants can be large and dangerous, but they can also be small fragments that go unnoticed. However, all of them represent a risk to current and future missions. Collisions in space are another critical aspect of space debris. Did you know that? Just like on a highway, when two vehicles collide, they generate more waste. The same happens in space. When an inactive satellite collides with a fragment of a rocket, thousands of small metal pieces are generated. These fragments become new debris that in turn can collide with other satellites, creating a domino effect. This phenomenon is known as the Kessler syndrome, and it is a growing concern for scientists and space agencies. The classification of space debris does not stop there. There are also smaller objects such as screws and paint chips that have come off satellites. Despite their tiny size, these fragments can cause significant damage. Imagine hitting a windshield with a marble. Although it seems insignificant, it can shatter it. In space, a small piece of metal traveling at high speed can be fatal for an operational satellite. As technology advances, so do the types of space debris. Nowadays, there are more satellites in orbit than ever before. The popularity of communication, Earth observation, and navigation satellites has increased exponentially in recent decades. Each new launch adds more elements to the already crowded Earth orbit. With every new satellite launched, the possibility of it becoming debris in the future also increases. The situation is so serious that space agencies have begun to classify and track these objects. However, despite their efforts, the amount of space debris continues to grow. Can you imagine a city where people keep throwing trash without worrying about cleanliness? That's how space feels right now. There are more and more objects floating uncontrollably, creating a dangerous environment. So how does this affect the satellites that are still functioning? Every time a satellite is launched into space, it must take into account the vast amount of debris in its path. Space agencies conduct simulations and calculations to foresee possible collisions, but there are never any guarantees. This means that before a satellite is launched, its trajectory must be carefully planned, which can complicate launches and increase costs. The classification of space debris also impacts research and future space missions. As humanity seeks to explore beyond Earth's orbit, the presence of debris in space becomes a barrier. The concern is not only for current satellites, but for the future of exploration. How can we send spacecraft to Mars, for example, if the path is filled with flying debris? Space debris is not just a technical problem, it is also an ethical and environmental challenge. The accumulation of waste in space raises questions about the responsibility of nations that launch satellites. Each country has a role to play in managing this new global crisis. Is it fair for some countries to continue launching satellites without worrying about how they will handle those that become obsolete? The issue of space debris leads us to think about how we can innovate and design satellites that are more sustainable. New technologies are emerging to address this problem. The idea is to build satellites that are easier to dismantle or that have mechanisms to safely deorbit at the end of their useful life. This could change the way we interact with space and significantly reduce the amount of debris we generate. The future of space debris is uncertain, but what is certain is that each of us has a role to play in the solution. Education and awareness are essential for people to understand the magnitude of this problem. An informed citizenry can demand action from their governments and support initiatives aimed at cleaning up space. The classification of space debris is not just a technical fact, it is a reminder that, even in the vast universe, we must be responsible. The next time you look up at the starry sky, remember that while we admire the beauty of the cosmos, we must also take care not to leave a trail of waste behind us. Did you know that space debris can be a real danger to functioning satellites? Imagine you are on a highway where each vehicle represents a satellite in orbit. Now think about the number of abandoned cars on the road, blocking the way and putting those still in motion at risk. This is how space debris affects our operational satellites. But what is the true impact of this situation? Operational satellites depend on a safe environment to function properly. However, the increasing amount of debris in space can turn into a real obstacle course. These fragments of metal and plastic, which were once part of successful space missions, now threaten the lifespan of satellites. But how is it possible that something that was a technological marvel has become such a great danger? The answer lies in the inertia of space. A piece of space debris can move at astonishing speeds, reaching up to 30,000 kilometers per hour. To put this into perspective, imagine a small projectile traveling at that speed. A collision between a satellite and a piece of debris could cause irreparable damage, turning a satellite into junk in the blink of an eye. Can you imagine the devastation this could cause in communications, meteorology, and other critical areas? As the amount of space debris increases, the odds of collisions also rise. This not only puts satellites at risk, but also creates more space debris. It's a vicious cycle. A satellite collides with a fragment and breaks into thousands of pieces, which in turn can collide with other satellites. How can this spiral be stopped? Space agencies around the world are aware of the situation and are working hard to monitor debris. Every year, thousands of tracking operations are conducted on objects in orbit to anticipate possible collisions. However, the problem continues to grow. What would happen if they did nothing? We could reach a point where certain orbits become untraversable, limiting our exploration and communication capabilities. The impact of space debris is not limited to satellites, it also affects crewed missions. Imagine you are in a spacecraft surrounded by thousands of fragments that could puncture your ship in seconds. This is a risk that astronauts face every time they venture into space. The safety of crewed missions depends on the ability to foresee and avoid these dangers. Moreover, space debris has a domino effect on the development of new technologies. Companies designing satellites and spacecraft now have to consider the risk of collisions in their planning. This involves higher costs and longer development times. Have you ever wondered how many innovations are being delayed because of this issue? In this scenario, education and awareness play a fundamental role. It is crucial for the public to understand the magnitude of the problem and its impact on daily life. From communications to weather forecasting, space debris affects aspects of our lives that we often take for granted. How can we generate a change in public perception about this issue? Understanding the impact of space debris is just the first step. Solutions must be discussed and promoted. There are initiatives underway that aim not only to clean up space but also to prevent the creation of more debris. From satellites designed to disintegrate at the end of their lifespan to technologies for capturing waste, there is a wide spectrum of ideas. But will they be enough? The responsibility does not fall solely on space agencies. Every nation that sends a satellite into space has a role to play. It is a collective effort that requires collaboration from all countries involved in space activities. International cooperation is essential to develop effective strategies to address the problem of space debris. The future of space exploration depends on our actions today. How we manage space debris will determine whether we can continue making advances in research and technology. Imagine a space free of waste where satellites can operate without the fear of collisions. Wouldn't that be an ideal future? Space debris is a reminder that our actions have consequences. As we explore beyond our planet, we must do so responsibly. Education, technology, and international cooperation are key to mitigating this problem. The next time you look at the sky, remember that there is much more at stake than just stars and planets. The impact of space debris is a challenge we cannot ignore. Every fragment in orbit tells a story of what was, but it also warns us of what could be if we do not act. The question is, are we willing to face this challenge and seek concrete solutions? Or will we let the story of space debris become a legacy of neglect and risk? The Kármán zone is a fascinating concept that makes us think about what it really means to be in space. Did you know that this region is located at an altitude of about 100 kilometers above the Earth's surface? It is the magical boundary that separates our planet's atmosphere from the vast emptiness of outer space. In this zone, the conditions are very different. The atmosphere is so thin that aircraft like commercial airplanes cannot sustain themselves, but satellites can orbit without problems. Now, what happens when we talk about space debris? The Kármán zone plays a crucial role in the accumulation of waste in orbit. Imagine you are on a dance floor. In the center, there is a wide space where everyone can move freely. However, as more and more people start to dance, the space becomes tighter and tighter. Something similar happens in this zone around the Earth. With each new satellite launched into space, a new dancer joins the floor, and although it seems there is plenty of space, the reality is that it is filling up quickly. So what happens when a satellite stops functioning? It becomes a space zombie, an object that continues to float in the Kármán zone but no longer serves its purpose. This phenomenon is starting to cause concern, as an inoperative satellite can become a dangerous obstacle for other functioning satellites. It's like if, on our dance floor, suddenly someone stopped moving and just stayed there, blocking everyone else. But how much space is there really in the Kármán zone? Although it seems vast, the reality is that there are thousands of satellites and fragments of space debris in orbit. It is estimated that there are more than 30,000 objects larger than 10 centimeters floating in this region, and as these objects multiply, the possibility of collisions increases, creating even more waste. It's as if on our dance floor, instead of dancing, we started pushing each other, causing more and more people to fall. One question that arises from all this is, what are we doing about it? The answer is that we are not doing enough. Although we have begun to raise awareness of the problem, the lack of action can have disastrous consequences. Space, just like our dance floor, needs rules and regulations to ensure that everyone can move freely and safely. In the Kármán zone, gravity plays an interesting role. The higher you are, the less gravity you feel, which allows satellites to stay in orbit. However, this does not mean they are completely out of danger. The interaction between objects in this zone can generate collision forces that result in the creation of more fragments. It's like if on our dance floor the music sped up and everyone started moving faster, increasing the chances of a collision. Now imagine that instead of dancing, we decided to play a game of bowling on the floor. Every time a bowling ball hits a pin, more pins fall to the ground, creating a mess. In space, every collision of satellites or fragments of space debris produces more waste, making the problem exponential. Each new fragment becomes a new dancer that needs space, and the floor becomes increasingly chaotic. The Kármán zone is not only home to satellites, but also to rocket fragments and other objects we have launched into space. These elements, which were once useful, now represent a constant risk. How can we learn to manage this mess in our cosmic dance floor? The answer lies in innovation and international collaboration. Every day, scientists and experts are working on solutions to clean up space debris and protect our Kármán zone. From giant nets that capture waste to satellites designed to deorbit in a controlled manner at the end of their lifespan, the ideas are as creative as they are necessary. But will this technology be enough to address a rapidly growing problem? The importance of the Kármán zone goes beyond the accumulation of space debris. It serves as a reminder that every action we take in space has an impact. As we continue to explore and use space, we must be aware of our responsibility to keep it clean and safe. Education and awareness are key to ensuring that everyone understands the importance of protecting this delicate ecosystem. As we move into the future, the Kármán zone becomes a battleground between innovation and neglect. Will we be able to find the necessary balance to enjoy the benefits of space without compromising its integrity? The answer to this question will define what our access to space will look like in the years to come. The responsibility does not only fall on nations and companies, but on each of us as citizens of a world that looks to the stars. How many times have we heard about car accidents on Earth? Now imagine that these accidents occur on a highway that is not only invisible but also hundreds of kilometers above our heads. This highway is space, and the garbage circulating on it includes remnants of satellites, rocket fragments, and other debris that can wreak havoc on space missions. When we talk about collisions in space, the question that arises is, how often do they occur? Although it sounds alarming, collisions are not as unusual as we might think. According to estimates, there are thousands of objects in orbit that could collide with each other. But are we really aware of the risk this poses to operational satellites? To put this into perspective, imagine you are on a dance floor full of people. Each person represents a satellite in orbit. Now, if suddenly several people began to move uncontrollably, the likelihood of them bumping into each other would increase. In space, satellites and fragments of space debris are those dancers moving at extreme speeds, making even the smallest bump potentially devastating. A collision can release a surprising amount of energy, resulting in the creation of more fragments. In fact, a single impact can generate hundreds, if not thousands, of small pieces that become new space debris. This creates a dangerous cycle. More collisions generate more debris, and more debris increases the risk of new collisions. It's like a domino effect that can spiral out of control quickly. Data shows that there are over 1 million pieces of space debris larger than 1 millimeter. Although these fragments are small, they travel at speeds of up to 27,000 kilometers per hour. To put it in more visual terms, this is comparable to being hit by a projectile. The possibility of damage is real and serious, but how are these risks monitored? There are organizations that track space debris and operational satellites. They use a combination of telescopes and radars to follow the movement of these objects. Just as an air traffic controller monitors airplanes in the sky, these organizations work tirelessly to prevent catastrophic collisions. However, the number of objects in space makes this task monumental. What happens when a potential collision is detected? In some cases, the orbits of satellites can be adjusted to avoid the collision. This process is like changing lanes on a road to prevent an accident, but in space it is done with impressive mathematical precision. However, not all satellites have the ability to maneuver, leaving some in a state of vulnerability. Future space missions are also affected by the growing amount of space debris. Every time a new mission is launched, the possibility of collisions is considered. With each launch, we have to ask ourselves, are we adding more problems to an already overloaded system? The answer is a resounding yes, and this dilemma raises serious questions about the sustainability of our activities in space. Beyond satellites, the risk also extends to crewed spacecraft. Imagine astronauts on the International Space Station working on their mission, and suddenly, a piece of space debris approaches at high speed. This is not just a science fiction scenario, but a real concern that must be considered. Collisions have occurred in the past. A notable case is that of the Iridium satellite and a Russian communications satellite that collided in 2009. The result was the creation of thousands of additional fragments that now orbit the Earth, further increasing the problem of space debris. This incident reminds us that although space is vast, it is not immune to the consequences of our actions. As we continue to launch more satellites and missions, the question persists: what will happen if we do not act? The risk of a Kessler syndrome, a scenario where the density of objects in orbit causes chain reactions of collisions, becomes a terrifying possibility. In this scenario, space could become untraversable, limiting our future explorations and developments. The future of our space activities depends on how we address the issue of debris. It is essential for the international community to come together to find effective solutions. The responsibility falls on all of us. Every nation that launches satellites must consider the impact of its actions in space. It is a true dilemma that invites reflection. Are we prepared to face the consequences of our exploration? The answer may determine the course of our future adventures in the cosmos. Space debris is not just a technical problem, but a global challenge that requires a collective effort to ensure that space remains an accessible and safe place for humanity. Did you know that in the vast ocean of stars surrounding us, there are thousands of objects floating, and not all of them are stars or planets? We are talking about space debris, a problem that is starting to worry both scientists and engineers. But how do we know what's up there? Who is watching our sky to prevent this space junk from causing problems? Imagine you are a traffic guard, but instead of being at an intersection, you are floating in space, observing a constant flow of vehicles. In this case, those vehicles are satellites, rockets, and of course space debris. There are monitoring projects that track these objects, ensuring they do not become a danger to operational satellites. But how do they do it? One of the main monitoring systems uses radar telescopes to track objects in space. This is like having a radar that can detect a small boat in the middle of an ocean. These telescopes can identify objects as small as a tennis ball. Imagine it, an object the size of a tennis ball orbiting at thousands of kilometers per hour. Can you imagine the impact it could have if it collided with an active satellite? The data collected by these systems is essential. It is used to create maps of the objects in orbit and predict their trajectories. Think of it as a traffic map. If you know the location of an accident, you can divert drivers to avoid a bottleneck. Similarly, if satellite operators can know the location of space debris, they can maneuver their satellites to avoid collisions. But what happens if things go wrong? The answer is not simple. In space, a collision can generate even more debris. A single crash can multiply the amount of waste, creating a domino effect. So the task of monitoring is not just about locating objects, but also about preventing the creation of more debris. However, not all countries have access to the same technology or resources to perform effective monitoring. This leads to a critical question. How can we collaborate internationally to ensure that everyone has access to the necessary information to protect our skies? Cooperation among nations is key, as space debris does not understand borders. In response to these challenges, consortia of countries and organizations have formed to work together to create better tracking systems. Just like in a relay race where each runner passes the baton to the next, the exchange of information between countries is vital to maintaining safety in space. Now imagine that private companies are also taking the initiative in this area. Some of them are developing innovative technologies to track and clean up space debris. Isn't it fascinating to think that the future of space cleanup could be in the hands of companies that previously only focused on building satellites? As we move forward in this space age, the need to monitor space debris becomes more urgent. More and more satellites are being launched into space, and the number of objects in orbit continues to grow. Are we prepared to handle this increase? The answer is not as simple as it seems. Monitoring initiatives are crucial, but we also need to educate the public about the importance of this issue. Let's ask ourselves, if the public understands the impact of space debris, could we foster more support for innovative solutions? Education is the first step to raising awareness and ultimately driving effective action. It is also worth mentioning that advances in sensor technology are enabling more precise monitoring. These new devices are capable of detecting smaller objects and tracking their trajectories with greater accuracy. Can you imagine a future where we can predict collisions with almost millimeter precision? And so, as we continue to explore space, monitoring space debris becomes an essential part of that exploration. Every new satellite we send into space must be accompanied by a strategy to ensure it does not become a new problem. As if every new car on the road came with its own surveillance system to prevent accidents. Managing space debris is a global challenge that requires cooperation from everyone. If we can unite efforts among nations and sectors, we can establish a safer future in space. Are we ready to take on that responsibility? The answer is in our hands, and the time to act is now. So the next time you look up at the sky, remember that there are not just stars. There is also a network of surveillance working to protect our space. Space debris may seem like a distant problem, but in reality, it is closer than we think. Have you ever looked up at the sky and wondered what lies beyond the stars? There, in the vastness of space, orbit not only functional satellites, but also those that have become what we call space debris. But what if I told you that there are creative solutions in development to clean our orbital environment? It's a fascinating and urgent topic. Imagine a vast ocean, but instead of water, it is filled with junk. That is the reality of space around our planet. Space debris represents a growing challenge. However, amidst this chaos, there is a global effort to find innovative ways to clean it up. But how can such a vast and complicated problem be addressed? Cleaning space is not as simple as sweeping the floor of your home. It requires advanced technology and a deep understanding of space physics. There are multiple proposals ranging from giant nets that catch debris to satellites equipped with magnets that collect metal fragments. Can you imagine a fishing satellite casting its net to catch space junk? It sounds like science fiction, but it is closer to reality than you think. There is one project that has captured the attention of many. A satellite called Remove Debris. This small explorer has been designed to test different cleaning methods. One of its experiments involves launching a catcher that targets a piece of debris to capture it. This approach not only demonstrates that it is possible, but also opens the door to other innovations. But how effective can it really be? Another intriguing proposal is the use of lasers. Think of a laser beam that not only illuminates, but can also alter the trajectory of an object in space. This idea may sound like magic, but it is based on scientific principles. Lasers could be used to push debris fragments out of their orbit, directing them towards the atmosphere where they would disintegrate. But what challenges do we face in implementing this technology? We cannot forget to mention the challenges of international coordination. Cleaning space is not the task of a single country. Every nation that launches satellites has the responsibility to contribute to their maintenance. In this sense, alliances are being formed between different countries and organizations to develop cleaning technologies. What if all governments work together on this effort? One of the concerns is the cost. The technology to clean space can be expensive and requires investment, but is it worth spending money on something that seems so distant? The answer is a resounding yes. Protecting our space infrastructure, which is vital for communication, navigation, and research, is an investment in our future. In this context, a new trend is also emerging: designing biodegradable satellites. Just like the products we use in our daily lives, these satellites are being designed to break down at the end of their lifespan, thereby reducing the amount of debris we leave behind. Wouldn't it be wonderful if what we send into space could disappear responsibly? Innovative ideas are not limited to cleaning technology alone. Education and awareness also play a crucial role. The more we know about space debris and its consequences, the more motivated we will be to act. Just as we take care of our planet, we must learn to care for the space surrounding it. What if each of us became an ambassador for clean space? Imagination is key in this process. Creativity can lead us to solutions we have not yet considered. How about a system of debris traps that works like a giant magnet in space? Or perhaps a kind of collecting robot that takes care of cleaning while other satellites continue to operate? Science fiction can inspire real solutions if we are willing to think outside the box. Every little action counts. From research to the development of new technologies, every step we take brings us closer to a cleaner space. If a group of engineers and innovators can work together to create an effective cleaning system, imagine what we could achieve if we all contributed our part. In summary, although the problem of space debris may seem overwhelming, solutions are on the way. The combination of innovative technology, International collaboration and education can pave the way for a future where space is a cleaner and safer place. Are we ready to be part of this revolution? So as you look up at the sky, remember that while there are challenges ahead, there is also a world of possibilities. Cleaning space is a monumental task, but with every bright idea and every joint effort, we are one step closer to achieving it. Stay curious and committed, because the future of space depends on us. Have you ever wondered what happens when a satellite stops functioning? Imagine a car that keeps driving around the city, but its driver has decided not to steer it anymore. This is how zombie satellites work. Objects that, although they have lost their utility, continue to orbit the Earth, sometimes erratically and occasionally threatening other spacecraft in their path. These inactive satellites have become an increasing concern for engineers and scientists worldwide. One of the most notorious cases is that of the Iridium 33 satellite, which was operational when it collided with an old Russian satellite in 2009. The impact generated thousands of fragments that now float in space. These types of incidents are not isolated. In reality, we are talking about a broader phenomenon, a series of collisions that have multiplied the amount of space debris and with it the risk that other operational satellites may suffer damage. But how did we get to this point? Zombie satellites are not just a technical problem, they represent a real risk to current and future space missions. These machines, which were once the pride of technology, have now become ticking time bombs orbiting the Earth. Imagine you are on a highway and suddenly a stopped car appears in your path. The only difference is that this car is traveling at hundreds of kilometers per hour, and you can't stop in time. As the amount of space debris increases, the possibility of collisions becomes more likely. In space, every small fragment counts, and a piece of metal the size of a screw can cause irreversible damage to an operational satellite. This has led to growing concern among space agencies, which have to consider not only their own missions but also the dangers posed by zombie satellites. But what can we learn from past incidents? One of the most notable examples is the case of the Fengyun 1 satellite, an old Chinese weather satellite that stopped functioning in 2006. 4 years later, it collided with a defunct rocket, generating over 3,000 fragments, most of which still float in space. These collisions not only create more debris but also make it increasingly difficult to manage space traffic. It's like a party where all the guests have lost control. Chaos is inevitable. Moreover, the impact of these zombie satellites is not limited to the possibility of collisions, it extends to the economy. Every time a satellite is damaged or destroyed, it means that more resources are required to launch new satellites, increasing the cost of space missions. In a world where access to space is becoming increasingly important for communication, weather forecasting, and scientific research, this is a problem we cannot afford to ignore. Technology has advanced and many modern satellites are designed to be more resistant to collisions, but that does not stop zombie satellites. The question that arises is, how can we address this problem? Some experts suggest that better decommissioning protocols are needed for satellites that reach the end of their useful life. Instead of letting them wander indefinitely, they should be directed to safer orbits or deorbited to burn up in the Earth's atmosphere. Additionally, the development of space debris removal technology is crucial. There are fascinating proposals, such as using nets to capture these inactive satellites or using lasers to divert their trajectory. However, these technologies are still in development and require significant international collaboration to be effectively implemented. The truth is that the problem of zombie satellites reflects our own relationship with space. We have been responsible for leaving waste on our planet, and now we must face the consequences of our actions in space. Every country that launches a satellite has a collective responsibility to ensure that it does not contribute to this growing crisis. In this context, education and awareness are essential. It's not just about scientists and technicians. We all need to be aware of what is at stake. Space debris affects our daily lives, from weather prediction to global communication. The next time you use your phone or check the weather forecast, remember that those services depend on a space free of obstacles. In summary, zombie satellites are a complex problem that requires creative and collaborative solutions. Each incident, each collision reminds us that space management is not just a technical matter, but a shared responsibility. The next time you look up at the starry sky, think about what is up there, not only the shining operational satellites, but also those that have ceased to serve and in some way continue to be part of the vast universe surrounding us. The story of zombie satellites is just one chapter in the narrative of our space exploration, and it is in our hands to write a more responsible and sustainable ending. Space debris is a problem that has grown uncontrollably, and with it, the need to establish laws and regulations that address this challenge. Why is this so important? In a world where more and more countries are launching satellites into space, managing that waste becomes crucial to ensure that our activities in space do not descend into chaos. Let us reflect on the responsibility we have as humanity in this vast ocean of stars. Laws and regulations regarding space debris are not as straightforward as they might seem. It starts with the need to define who is responsible for what happens in space. If a satellite from one country collides with another, who takes the blame? The country that launched the satellite or the one that designed it? It's a legal puzzle that we are still trying to solve. As more nations venture into space, the lack of clear agreements can lead to conflicts and misunderstandings. Speaking of agreements, there is the Outer Space Treaty, signed in 1967 by over 100 nations. This treaty establishes that space is the heritage of all mankind, but it does not detail how to manage the debris we generate. Imagine space as a large playground. Everyone wants to play, but no one wants to pick up the toys afterward. Thus, the situation becomes complicated and cluttered. In this context, the International Telecommunication Union also plays an important role. It sets standards for the allocation of frequencies and orbits, but it does not directly address the issue of inactive objects. It's like having a guest list for a party, but not worrying about who takes home the dirty dishes. This lack of regulation can jeopardize future missions and the safety of operational satellites. The concept of national responsibility is also fundamental. According to the United Nations, each country that launches an object into space is responsible for its management, even if that object becomes debris. This means that countries must have a plan to deactivate their satellites and ensure they do not become threats. But who is really monitoring this? The answer is somewhat grim. There is no central authority overseeing the space activities of each nation. Moreover, the lack of clear consequences for not following these regulations is also a problem. What would happen if a country decides to ignore the protocols and lets its satellites become debris? Without a system of penalties or incentives, it's easy to forget about responsibility. Thinking about this is like having a garden. If you don't pull the weeds, soon your garden will be a mess. Meanwhile, some countries have begun to take the lead in creating their own laws regarding space debris. Japan and the European Union, for example, have implemented regulations to ensure that their satellites have an appropriate end. But this is not enough. We need a global approach where all countries collaborate and commit to cleaning up space. Space cleanup initiatives have also emerged as a response to this problem. Just as regulations are established for fishing in the ocean, we must also set standards for space. The idea of developing technologies to eliminate space debris is exciting and necessary, but without an adequate legal framework, these solutions may not be effective. It is crucial to foster international dialogue on the management of space debris. If all countries sit down at the table to discuss and establish clear norms, we could avoid future problems. Creating a clean and safe space is a shared responsibility, and cooperation is key to achieving it. Private companies are also beginning to play an important role in this scenario. With the increase in commercial activity in space, the pressure to develop effective solutions for space debris intensifies. This can be an opportunity to innovate in cleanup technologies, but it is also vital that these companies operate within a regulatory framework that prioritizes sustainability. It is essential for the public and governments to become aware of the issue of space debris. Education is the first step to generating meaningful changes in this area. Just as we learn from a young age to take care of our planet, we also need to learn to take care of our outer space. In summary, legislation and regulation regarding space debris is a complex and urgent issue. The lack of clear norms and diffuse responsibility can lead to a future where our activities in space are threatened by the waste we have created. International cooperation, technological innovation, and education are essential to address this challenge and ensure a sustainable future in space exploration. Therefore, it is crucial that each of us commits to being a good neighbor in the vast neighborhood of the cosmos. What if I told you that space debris could change the course of our future explorations? That's right, space junk, especially zombie satellites, has a direct impact on how we plan to advance beyond our atmosphere. In a future where humanity dreams of colonizing Mars and exploring other planets, the accumulation of debris in low Earth orbit becomes an obstacle we cannot ignore. The first question that arises is, what does it really mean to have space debris on our interplanetary navigation routes? Imagine you are on a road full of potholes, obstacles, and waste. That's how engineers and scientists feel when planning missions to other worlds. Every piece of metal, every inactive satellite is a potential hazard that can damage spacecraft and jeopardize human lives. Missions to Mars, for example, require very specific trajectories. If zombie satellites or rocket debris become a more serious problem, we might have to change our routes, which could increase the cost and duration of missions. This raises a crucial question. Are we willing to sacrifice the advancement of space exploration for not properly managing our orbital waste? In recent decades, we have seen exponential growth in the number of satellites launched into space. Each new satellite is a promise of advanced technology and global communications, but it is also a reminder that our ability to clean up after ourselves has not evolved at the same pace. Are we creating an environment prone to accidents in which our dreams of exploration could be compromised? Moreover, let's think about international collaboration. Space exploration has always been a joint effort. But how can we effectively collaborate if each country has its own vision regarding the management of space debris? The lack of a clear regulatory framework can complicate joint missions. Nations need to work together to define standards and protocols that protect not only their interests but also the future of the space we all share. Technological evolution also plays a fundamental role. Future spacecraft will need to be designed with greater awareness of the space debris surrounding them. What if, instead of just thinking about how to send spacecraft to Mars, we start thinking about how to make those spacecraft resilient to the threats that already exist in space? Innovation must include not only the advancement toward new destinations, but also the protection of our exploration vehicles. Meanwhile, the possibility that space debris wreaks havoc on our interplanetary ambitions is not just a technical issue, it is a matter of shared responsibility. Every time we launch a satellite, we are leaving a footprint in space. Are we really prepared to take responsibility for that footprint? The answer to this question could define what space exploration looks like in the coming decades. As interest in exploring other planets grows, so does the need for more intensive monitoring and surveillance of space debris. Is it possible that in the future we will have a traffic system in space, similar to the lights and signals on our roads? This could be essential to avoid collisions and protect both our operational satellites and future missions. We must not forget that education and awareness are fundamental in this process. If we do not start talking about space debris in schools and in the media, we risk it becoming a problem that is difficult to solve. The next generation of space explorers must be informed about the challenges we face. How can we expect them to care for space if we do not teach them about the importance of keeping it clean? The future of space exploration is exciting, but it is filled with challenges. Space debris is one of the biggest, and its impact can be devastating if we do not act. So what steps can we take today to ensure that our interplanetary ambitions do not become an unattainable dream due to our own negligence? Humanity has always looked to the stars in awe, but now more than ever we must look at the space we have created, that vast ocean of possibilities that is also full of dangers. How we manage space debris will not only determine the success of our future missions, but also reflect our ethics as a civilization. Are we ready to take on that challenge and ensure that space remains a place of opportunities and discoveries? With every decision we make today about space debris, we are shaping the path for future generations. The time to act is now, and the responsibility falls on all of us. The issue of space debris not only affects satellites in space, but also raises a series of concerns about its impact on our planet. The question that arises is, what will happen if this debris, which orbits thousands of kilometers from Earth, decides to fall? Imagine a scenario where an inactive satellite, known as a zombie satellite, disintegrates upon entering our atmosphere. The fragments could fall in different parts of the world. Can you imagine if one of those fragments hit a populated area? The consequences could be devastating. Space debris, although it is in orbit, is not immune to Earth's gravity. When objects in space decay in their orbit, they can eventually start to fall toward the surface. How long does it take to fall? It can vary from a few years to centuries, depending on their altitude and the state of their orbit. If a zombie satellite becomes an uncontrollable projectile, it could pose a real threat to life on Earth. But is it possible that space debris affects our environment in other ways? Let's think about the fuels that these satellites use. Many of them contain chemicals that, upon disintegration, could release harmful compounds into the atmosphere. Imagine those compounds dispersing in the air, affecting the quality of the air we breathe. Space pollution can have repercussions on the health of our planet. The notion of space debris also leads us to consider the idea that everything we launch into space has an impact. Earth is our home, and what we do in space can influence our environment. For example, every time a satellite explodes or breaks down, thousands of fragments are generated that remain floating in orbit. What would happen if those fragments collided with other operational satellites? The chain of events can be unpredictable and often catastrophic. It's not just about the possibility of these fragments falling to Earth. There is also concern that space pollution will influence future exploration. How can we send missions to Mars or beyond if space is cluttered with debris? As we advance in our exploration of the cosmos, space debris could become a significant obstacle that we must overcome. Every mission must carefully consider its trajectory and the risk posed by debris in its path. Think of a satellite's life like that of a human being. When a human reaches the end of their life, they leave a legacy, but in the case of satellites, that legacy can be destructive. Every satellite launched into space has an expiration date, and once it stops functioning, it becomes a potential floating hazard. If we do not manage these objects properly, we could be leaving a legacy of waste that will affect future generations. Moreover, space debris could impact the flora and fauna of Earth. If an object falls to Earth and contaminates the soil or water, the effects could be felt far beyond the impact site. Ecosystems are fragile, and any alteration could trigger chain reactions. What would happen if a vital agricultural area became contaminated? Food security could be threatened. The scientific community is increasingly aware of these dangers. Research on the environmental impact of space debris is crucial. Why? Because by better understanding how space debris interacts with our environment, we can develop more effective strategies to mitigate those risks. We are not only talking about protecting satellites, but also about protecting our planet. In a broader context, managing space debris is a topic that involves global responsibility. Every nation that launches satellites has a duty to the rest of the world. How can we ensure that the actions of one country do not jeopardize the safety of others? International cooperation is essential to address these challenges. If we do not work together, the consequences could be disastrous. The question we all must ask ourselves is, how far are we willing to go to protect our home? We must act before the situation becomes a crisis. Education and awareness are key steps for everyone to understand the magnitude of the problem. Space debris is not just a problem for scientists or engineers, it is a problem for all of us. Imagine a future where space exploration is safe and sustainable. a future where space debris is effectively managed and where every launch is conducted responsibly. This future is possible, but it requires a collective commitment. Responsibility does not rest solely with governments, but also with each of us. Space debris is a wake-up call. It is a reminder that our actions have consequences, even in the vast universe. On this journey toward the future, we must be aware that protecting our planet begins with the proper management of our space environment. Earth is our home, and we must take care of it, even from space. Space debris is not just a technical problem, it is a dilemma that involves the responsibility of nations. Who is responsible for cleaning up this chaos in space? The answer to this question is not as straightforward as it seems, and that is precisely what makes it so intriguing. When a country launches a satellite, it assumes responsibility for that object. But what happens when the satellite stops functioning and becomes a zombie? At this point, the situation becomes complicated. In the context of space exploration, countries must be aware that every time they send a satellite into space, they are contributing to a fragile ecosystem. This ecosystem, which should be a space for cooperation and discovery, is becoming a field of debris. And here arises the question, what role should nations play in managing the debris they generate? Responsibility does not stop on the ground. In space, each country must be a good neighbor and take care of its part of the neighborhood. Let's take the example of a country that launches a series of satellites to improve communication. These satellites are like cars on a road. If a vehicle breaks down and is left in the middle of the road, it not only affects its owner but also all other drivers. Similarly, an inoperative satellite can pose a danger to functioning satellites and future missions. Therefore, the question is, how can countries ensure that their cars do not become space junk? The answer is not simple. Although there are international agreements that seek to regulate space activity, many of them are more recommendations than binding laws. Often, countries can ignore these guidelines without real consequences. Imagine a game where there are rules, but no one follows them. That is somewhat what happens in space. Each country can launch whatever it wants, and if it does not have a plan to dispose of the debris, it becomes part of the problem. The issue of responsibility also manifests in the realm of international collaboration. When one satellite collides with another, the repercussions are not limited to a single country. It is a global problem that can affect multiple nations and their assets in space, so why not work together to find solutions? Cooperation is essential to prevent the situation from worsening. However, despite efforts, tensions still exist between nations competing for supremacy in space. History shows us that managing space debris is not just a matter of technology, but also of diplomacy. Countries must sit down at the table and discuss how to address this challenge. But what happens when economic interests clash with the need to care for space? The struggle for resources and access to orbit becomes a complex battle. Each nation has its own agenda, and often the protection of space takes a back seat. International treaties are a step in the right direction. However, the lack of enforcement mechanisms means that many countries do not feel the pressure to meet their commitments. Instead of acting as a global community, they often behave like individuals who only care about their own interests. This raises a critical question. Could a space crisis be the necessary catalyst for nations to unite and take on their responsibility? The future of space exploration depends on our ability to manage the debris we have already created. If a clear framework of responsibility is not established, we risk space becoming an inhospitable and dangerous place. Future missions to Mars and beyond could be threatened if we do not start acting now. Responsibility is not just a matter of ethics, but of survival. Imagine a future where countries work together to clean up space. What wonders could we achieve if everyone took their share of responsibility? Creating a global system for managing space debris could open new opportunities for research and exploration. Perhaps, just perhaps, we could make space a safer and more sustainable place. Responsibility does not end with debris management. It also involves educating the public about the importance of caring for our spatial environment. every individual can contribute to the conversation and pressure their governments to take action, responsibility is a circle that closes when each of us gets involved. So what can we do to make our nations take this issue seriously? The answer may lie in raising awareness. If more people understand the impact of space debris, perhaps governments will feel the pressure to act. In an interconnected world, every voice matters and every action can make a difference. The responsibility to care for our space is a matter that concerns us all. Space debris is a problem we cannot ignore. As we continue to explore beyond our planet, it is crucial that we take responsibility for what we leave behind. If we do not, we could face a future where space exploration becomes a distant dream. But if every nation unites and works collaboratively, the future of space could be bright and full of possibilities. Space debris is a problem that affects us all, and although it often seems far from our sight, its impact may be closer than we think. As the number of satellites in orbit grows, the need for a global response becomes urgent. But how can countries collaborate to face this challenge? The answer is not so simple. International cooperation is crucial, and right now, alliances are being formed to address the issue of space debris. First of all, it is essential to understand that no country has the capacity to solve this crisis on its own. Think of an ocean full of floating waste. A single country cannot clean all the water. The same happens in space. Satellites and other inactive objects are in orbits that can intersect with those of active satellites, creating an imminent risk. This is why international collaboration becomes a vital tool for managing and mitigating this danger. One of the most prominent initiatives is the European Space Agency's program, which has been working on joint projects with various nations and organizations. Can you imagine a global team of experts working together? Like an orchestra, where each one plays their instrument to create a symphony that benefits everyone. This is how experts from different countries are coming together to develop technologies and strategies that can help track and remove space debris. Another interesting collaboration is that of NASA with other space agencies. By sharing data and resources, they are creating a clearer map of the space in which they operate. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to have GPS in space? That's the idea, to know the location of every object in orbit to avoid collisions and better manage space traffic. In addition to space agencies, private companies are also beginning to get involved. Imagine that in addition to governments, large technology companies join the fight for a clean space. Some of these companies are developing innovative technologies to remove space debris, such as capture nets or satellites that can divert inactive objects. This hybrid approach, where the public and private sectors work together, may be key to tackling the challenge of space debris. However, collaboration is not limited to technology. Sharing information and experiences is also fundamental. International conferences serve as a platform where scientists and experts from around the world gather to discuss advancements and challenges. This is where ideas are generated that can lead to creative solutions. Who knows? A simple conversation at one of these conferences could lead to a major breakthrough that changes the way we manage space debris. Sometimes collaborative initiatives can seem like a complicated puzzle, where each piece must fit perfectly. It is a challenge, but the need to address the problem of space debris is so urgent that countries are willing to work together despite their differences. Conflict resolution and diplomacy play a crucial role in this process, as countries must negotiate agreements that benefit everyone. A notable example of collaboration is the Space Debris Mitigation Guidelines developed by the United Nations. This set of guidelines aims to promote responsibility in the use of space. Like a set of rules in a game, these guidelines help countries understand how they should operate in space to reduce debris generation. Although they are not legally binding, their adoption is an important step toward a cleaner future in space. Education and awareness are also key aspects of international collaboration. Many countries are beginning to include the topic of space debris in their educational programs. Can you imagine future generations of engineers and scientists learning about the importance of designing satellites that leave no waste? This will not only change the way satellites are designed and launched, but will also foster a mindset of responsibility in the next generation. The path to a debris-free space is long and complex. However, international collaborations are proving that by joining forces we can face this challenge. It is an effort that requires time, patience, and above all, a shared commitment. Every country must understand that space debris is not just a problem for their nation, but a global challenge that needs to be addressed urgently. In summary, the fight against space debris is a collective project, from cooperation between space agencies to the involvement of the private sector and education on responsibility in space. Every step counts. As we move toward a future where space exploration becomes increasingly common, we must remember that a clean space is a safe space for everyone. International collaboration is key to achieving this, and we all have a role to play in this mission. The public perception of space debris and zombie satellites is a fascinating and often surprising topic. In our daily lives, we are surrounded by information and entertainment, but we rarely think about what happens beyond our atmosphere. Why is it so difficult to capture people's attention on an issue that could have repercussions for the future of the planet? The answer lies in how the information is presented and the context in which it is discussed. The media plays a crucial role. Often when discussing zombie satellites or space debris, it is done in technical terms that can be overwhelming. But what if it were compared to a phenomenon closer to our reality? Imagine that Earth is like a big city and space is the traffic surrounding it. When cars representing satellites break down and get stranded in the middle of the road, don't they become a problem for everyone trying to get around? Documentaries and science programs have begun to address this topic more creatively. Instead of presenting it as a mere technical problem, they focus on the human stories behind space exploration. Who are the people designing and launching these satellites? What challenges do they face? By humanizing the topic, the public feels more connected. Curiosity is sparked, and suddenly, the idea of a zombie satellite wandering through space becomes a story worth paying attention to. Social media has also influenced how we perceive this issue. With a single click, a striking image or a short video can go viral. But what happens when virality is based on misinformation? Often news about space debris is simplified or altered to grab attention. This can lead to misunderstandings where space debris is thought to be an imminent problem that could fall on us at any moment, when in reality it is a long-term challenge that requires constant attention. Film and television have portrayed space debris in dramatic ways. Science fiction movies have presented scenarios where space pollution causes disasters. Is this representation fair? While drama can attract attention, it can also generate fear and confusion. The line between reality and fiction blurs, and what could be an educational topic becomes a source of anxiety for the public. Awareness campaigns have begun to emerge, trying to educate the public about the impact of space debris. However, many of these initiatives struggle to stand out in an information-saturated world. How can such a technical topic capture the attention of someone who generally feels disconnected from science? The answer may lie in everyday stories, showing how each of us, even if we are not engineers, can contribute to a cleaner and more sustainable future. Popular culture has started to include references to space debris. From memes to references in animated series, the topic is presented in a way that makes it accessible and understandable. But is it enough? While these representations can generate interest, it is also important to have an educational background that explains the gravity of the problem. Without a solid understanding, interest can fade as quickly as it appeared. Young people are especially receptive to these messages. Schools are beginning to include education about space and space debris in their curricula. But what can students do that goes beyond just learning? By engaging in creative projects such as designing models of satellites that can be recycled or reused, they empower themselves and become part of the solution. Curiosity and innovation can flourish if given the opportunity. The responsibility of the media and educators is enormous. How can they work together to ensure that information is presented in a way that is not only accurate but also intriguing? At the end of the day, the goal is to create a conversation that not only informs but also inspires. public perception can change if people feel they have a role to play in solving the problem. It is evident that the perception of space debris and zombie satellites reflects how we, as a society, address complex issues. As we move toward a future where space exploration becomes increasingly relevant, it is vital that we all stay informed and engaged. The union of science, culture, and education may be the key to transforming the way we view the space around us. Are we ready to take on that responsibility? In a world where technology is advancing by leaps and bounds, satellites have become indispensable tools for our daily lives. But what if I told you that many of these satellites are designed with a future in mind that seeks to minimize the creation of space debris? Innovation in satellite design has become key to addressing the problem of zombie satellites and the growing accumulation of waste in space. Engineers and designers have begun to think differently. Instead of creating satellites that, once they complete their mission, simply become junk in space, alternatives are now being considered that allow these devices to disintegrate in a controlled manner. Can you imagine a satellite that can commit suicide in a controlled way at the end of its useful life? This concept is more than science fiction. It is a developing reality. One of the most innovative approaches is the use of satellites that have the capability to deorbit. This means that after completing their mission, they can safely descend into the Earth's atmosphere where they will burn up upon re-entry. In this way, they avoid becoming those dreaded zombie satellites that continue to drift aimlessly. This type of design is not only responsible, but also a way to protect operational satellites that depend on a debris-free space. What if I told you that some new satellites are designed to be lightweight and compact? By reducing their size and weight, not only are launch costs saved, but the amount of material that could end up as space debris is also decreased. Imagine that instead of launching a large satellite, a constellation of small satellites that work together is launched. This approach, known as constellation satellite systems, allows for greater efficiency and less risk of leaving debris in space. Moreover, the use of biodegradable materials is gaining popularity. Just as we seek to reduce plastic use in our daily lives, the design of satellites is exploring the use of materials that decompose naturally after their useful life. Wouldn't it be great if, instead of turning space into a landfill, satellites disintegrated without leaving a trace? Technologies have also evolved to include more efficient propulsion systems. These systems allow satellites to maneuver better and exit problematic orbits before becoming inactive. Just as a car that stops at a traffic light can continue moving when the light changes, a satellite equipped with these systems can change its trajectory and avoid becoming a dangerous obstacle. Collaboration between different countries and companies is also driving innovation in satellite design. By sharing knowledge and technology, more effective solutions are being developed. It's like several chefs coming together in a kitchen, each bringing their own recipe to create a delicious dish. Together, they are creating a more holistic approach to satellite design that minimizes the creation of space debris. Design is also taking modularity into account. This means that satellites are built in such a way that they can be repaired or upgraded in space, rather than being discarded. Imagine if your mobile phone could be upgraded without needing to buy a new one. This idea of upgrades in space not only extends the lifespan of satellites, but also reduces the need to launch new ones, thus decreasing waste production. 3D printing technology is also making its way into the world of satellites. This technique allows components to be manufactured directly in space, eliminating the need to transport parts from Earth. Wouldn't it be fantastic if we could build what we need right where we need it? This type of innovation is a step towards a more sustainable future in space exploration. But what about education and awareness regarding these advancements? It is essential that both designers and the general public understand the importance of building responsible satellites. Education should not only focus on technology, but also on the ethics behind its development. Future engineers must be aware of the consequences of their designs, just as citizens must be informed about how their decisions can impact space. Social media and the media play a crucial role in this awareness. By sharing information about innovations in satellite design, a dialogue can be generated about the responsibility we all have regarding space debris. Just like a community coming together to clean a park, it is necessary for everyone to take an active role in managing space. Finally, the question we all must ask ourselves is, are we ready for a future where responsible satellite design is the norm and not the exception? The answer depends on us, on our ability to adapt and embrace these new approaches. It is a challenge, but also an opportunity to create a cleaner and more sustainable space for future generations. So, as we look up at the sky and dream of space exploration, let us remember that every small advance in satellite design can make a big difference. The next time you see a satellite crossing the sky, think of human ingenuity and how we are working to make space a safer and cleaner place. Innovation is underway, and together we can be part of this exciting era of responsibility and discovery. Education and awareness about space debris are fundamental to addressing this growing problem. Imagine that Earth is like a garden and space is a vast sky surrounding it. In this garden, satellites are like flowers that provide us with essential services, from communications to weather data. But what happens when some of those flowers wilt and become trash? Undoubtedly, this can affect the beauty and health of our garden. A crucial aspect is understanding how space debris, which includes inactive satellites and rocket remnants, can impact daily life on Earth. Did you know that many of the services we consider basic depend on functioning satellites? Education about the importance of taking care of our space is essential for everyone to understand our collective responsibility. If we don't take care of our garden, we risk it becoming overrun with weeds, right? Curiosity is the first step toward education. By posing intriguing questions such as, how does space debris affect future missions to Mars? Or what would happen if an inactive satellite collided with an operational one? We can spark people's interest. These questions not only make people stop and think, but they also encourage the pursuit of information. Education should not be just a monologue. It should be a dialogue that motivates people to explore further. Educational programs in schools are a powerful tool for raising awareness from an early age. By introducing concepts like space debris in the classroom, we can inspire a new generation of scientists, engineers, and conscious citizens. Imagine a group of children in a science class learning about how satellites work and the importance of keeping space clean. Through hands-on activities like building satellite models, students can better understand the impact of their actions. Moreover, awareness campaigns in media and social networks are vital. Who hasn't seen a viral video that explains a complex problem in a simple and entertaining way? The key is to use clear and visual analogies that connect with people's everyday experiences. Comparing space debris to a traffic jam on the road can help visualize the problem. Just as a traffic jam can cause delays and accidents, space debris can endanger operational satellites in orbit. Using infographics and animations to explain space debris is another effective strategy. For example, showing how fragments of an inactive satellite can impact others in space can be visually striking and educational at the same time. The more people understand the magnitude of the problem, the more likely they are to join the cause of space cleanup. The power of influencers and content creators on platforms like YouTube cannot be underestimated. They have the ability to reach massive audiences and present scientific topics in an entertaining and accessible way. Why not use their influence to raise awareness about space debris? A video explaining the life cycle of a satellite from its launch to its eventual disposal could capture the attention of millions. This could inspire their followers to get involved and educate others. Collaborations with non-governmental organizations and universities can also be an effective path. Imagine a campaign where students and science experts work together to raise awareness about space debris. Such initiatives not only foster learning but also create a sense of community around a global problem. Another important aspect is public education, from talks in community centers to events in science museums. It's essential to take the message to different audiences. Anyone attending a talk about space debris could leave with a new perspective and perhaps a desire to share what they learned with friends and family. Education thus becomes a viral phenomenon that can expand beyond a single event. Creating mobile apps that inform about space debris and how it affects our world could also be an innovative strategy. Can you imagine receiving notifications about satellites that are about to collide? This could not only keep people informed, but also inspire a sense of responsibility about how each of us contributes to the current situation. It is also vital for educational institutions and governments to commit to including space education in their curricula. Space is part of our future, and understanding it now will help us make more informed decisions later. How can we expect to explore other planets if we don't take care of our own space? Awareness is not just the responsibility of experts. We all have a role to play. Each of us can contribute to the conversation about space debris and the importance of keeping space clean. By adopting small habits in our daily lives, such as supporting sustainability initiatives, we are taking steps toward a cleaner future, not just on Earth, but also in space. Finally, it is crucial to remember that knowledge empowers. The more we know about space debris and its effects, the more capable we will be of advocating for change. Education not only enlightens the mind, but can also inspire action. So are you ready to be part of this new era of space exploration, where cleanliness and responsibility are as important as discovery and innovation? Together, we can ensure that our cosmic garden continues to flourish for generations to come. Have you ever wondered how we could clean up space? The idea of eradicating space debris may seem like something out of a science fiction movie, but innovative solutions are actually being developed to tackle this growing problem. In an environment where zombie satellites and rocket fragments float around us, the need to act becomes increasingly urgent. So what are the most creative and effective proposals being explored to clean up our cosmic neighborhood? First, let's talk about nets. Imagine launching a giant net into space, as if you were fishing in the ocean, but instead of catching fish, you catch space debris. This is one of the ideas that some engineers are testing. The net would be deployed around inactive objects to capture them and eventually bring them to a place where they can be safely dismantled. Doesn't that sound fascinating? However, precision is crucial, as any mistake could result in more debris fragments. Another intriguing solution is the use of hunter satellites. These satellites would be equipped with advanced technology to track and approach space debris. Once they managed to reach an inactive satellite, they could be fitted with robotic arms to grab it and bring it to a lower orbit, where it would eventually disintegrate upon re-entering the atmosphere. Can you imagine a small team of satellites working together like a cleaning squad in space? Laser propulsion is another proposal gaining attention. In this approach, lasers would be used from Earth or other satellites to push inactive objects out of their orbits. This method may seem complicated, but essentially it involves applying a small force that over time can change the trajectory of an object in space. It's like gently pushing a ball in a different direction. But instead of a ball, you're dealing with satellites that weigh tons. Speaking of more novel solutions, some scientists have proposed the use of disintegration satellites, which would be specifically designed to collide with space debris and break it into smaller pieces. This might seem like a risky idea, but by reducing the size of the fragments, it makes it easier for them to disintegrate in the atmosphere. Isn't it curious to think that instead of getting rid of the debris, we could turn it into something less dangerous? Now, there are also initiatives focused on prevention, as it is easier to stop new debris from being created than to clean up what already exists. Satellites are being designed with technology that allows them to disintegrate in a controlled manner at the end of their lifespan. Imagine that instead of leaving a heavy object orbiting, a satellite turns to dust when it is no longer useful. This could be the first step toward a cleaner space. International collaboration also plays a key role in solving the space debris problem. Different countries are working together to develop standards and best practices in the construction and launch of satellites. Isn't it interesting to think that, although space exploration is often seen as a competition, cleaning up space could unite nations in a common effort? The use of artificial intelligence is also emerging as a powerful tool. AI systems can analyze data about space debris and predict movement patterns. This would allow hunter satellites to plan their movements with greater precision. With the help of complex algorithms, we could optimize routes and make space cleanup more efficient and effective. Experiments in space are also fundamental. In 2020, a satellite called Remove Debris was launched, which conducted tests to capture space debris using a net and an anchoring system. These experiments help demonstrate that many of the ideas that sound extravagant can become practical solutions. Every small step is a move toward cleaning up our cosmic environment. It is also important to promote education and public awareness about this issue. The solution to the space debris problem does not solely rest on scientists and engineers. We can all participate in the change. By sharing information and generating interest in the community, positive pressure can be created on governments and companies to take action. Who wouldn't want to live in a future where space is a clean and safe place? Finally, the key to success in cleaning up space may lie in constant innovation. As technology advances, new opportunities will arise to address this problem, from more efficient recycling methods in space to new forms of propulsion. Human creativity knows no bounds. The question is, are we ready to think outside the box and find solutions to this challenge? Cleaning up space is not just a technical problem, but also a matter of responsibility. As we venture beyond our planet, we must remember that space is a resource that must be protected. Finding innovative solutions for space debris will not only benefit future generations of explorers, but also preserve the environment we value so much. How do you envision the future of a clean and orderly space? The answer is in our hands, and action begins now. Space, that vast black ocean surrounding us, has become a dumping ground. The accumulation of zombie satellites and space debris is a problem we cannot ignore. What if I told you that for every operational satellite, there are several others that no longer work but continue to orbit the Earth? This situation not only affects active satellites but also jeopardizes future space missions and ultimately our access to the technology we use every day. Space debris is like traffic in a city. Imagine the streets filled with cars that no longer function, blocking the way for vehicles that actually need to move. Every time a satellite becomes a zombie, the risk of collisions increases. Did you know that on average, several collisions occur each year in space? These interactions can lead to explosions of fragments that create even more waste, complicating the situation. The future of space exploration largely depends on how we manage this problem. How can we continue sending missions to Mars or exploring the far reaches of the solar system if space is filled with dangerous floating debris? The answer is that we need to act now. Technology is advancing, and there are initiatives underway to clean up space, but international cooperation is key. What if all countries work together instead of acting in isolation? We could find more effective and faster solutions. Education and awareness are fundamental in this fight. Did you know that many people have no idea what space debris is or how it affects their daily lives? It's like when someone doesn't care about air pollution until they feel its effects. We need the public to understand that space debris is not a distant problem, but one that has real and direct implications. Greater education could inspire a new generation of innovators seeking creative solutions. Imagine a future where satellites are designed from the start to disintegrate at the end of their useful life. What if every new satellite came with an integrated recycling plan? Innovation in satellite design could drastically reduce the amount of debris we generate. Sustainability must be a priority not only on Earth but also in space. The responsibility of nations is another crucial aspect. Every country that launches a satellite must also be responsible for its dismantling. But how can we make all countries take on this responsibility? Through international laws and regulations. A global approach is necessary to ensure that everyone follows the same rules and works towards a cleaner space. The media and popular culture also play an essential role in the public perception of this problem. Movies and documentaries can help raise awareness about the danger of zombie satellites. But is that enough? Perhaps we need more stories that emotionally connect the audience to the issue, showcasing not only the risks but also the possible solutions. Environmental impact is another concern we cannot overlook. Space debris could have consequences not only in space but also on Earth. What would happen if a piece of metal fell to our planet? Although the probability is low, the risk remains. It reminds us that taking care of space also means taking care of our home. Future solutions could be surprising, from giant nets that catch debris to ships that become vacuum cleaners for space. The ideas are varied and creative. However, the key lies in implementation. What steps do we need to take to turn these solutions into reality? Collaboration between governments, businesses, and scientists is vital. In the end, the fight against space debris is a battle that involves everyone, from national leaders to ordinary citizens. Each has a role to play. Are we willing to take responsibility? The answer to that question will define the future of our space exploration. Let's reflect on what we have learned. The situation of zombie satellites and space debris is a complex challenge, but not insurmountable. With innovation, cooperation, and education, we can change the course. Space is a resource we must protect, not only for ourselves, but also for future generations. And so, as we look to the stars, let us remember that our responsibility does not end on Earth. Every satellite launch is a promise, and every act of care for space is a step toward a brighter future. The question is, are we ready to accept this responsibility and act? The time to act is now.